That's mainly for selfish reasons because it is hot as balls.
Yeah,
I'm good.
Figure that out. Please
I'm totally
don't
good.
pass out.
But I'm gonna it's not like that. But I'm sweating, so I'm just gonna like take a quick like AC break and then just like come back in here. So,
dude, put the fan on if you need to.
No, it's totally fine. Like I promise, I'm not suffering. I'm just like I'm just a wimp. So like, so I just like we have
you adapted back to the Midwest so quick.
I know, right? Like. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Seriously Loco, the Seriously Crazy fan podcast for El Paso Locomotive FC, a proud member of the Beautiful Game Network, brought to you by Roughneck Scarves and Icarus FC. I am one of your hosts, Phil Bakke, and we're back. I know it's been a little bit of a break, and a couple of you have expressed on social media the fact that you've been missing us, and I gotta say that warms the heart. And to join me tonight to bring us back to where we belong is the one, the only Mikka Burrell. Mikka, how's it going?
It's going well, Phil. I'm glad to be recording with you again. It has been, I think, like a month and change. So it was overdue. We were gonna record a few days ago, as some of you called us out. We know, we're sorry, just life things lately, but we're here.
Yeah, I want to apologize first and foremost because I moved house, as they say, and we're moved in now. The studio is back established. I thought it would be a little bit quicker turnaround than it was, but luckily, in the meantime, we kind of did some experimental stuff, I guess, like recording wise or content wise on Twitter. And the one and only Duke Keith kind of picked that up and ran with it. And we've been able to provide some content in that way.
Yeah. Well, first off, shout out Fernie, who's a loyal listener of Seriously Loco. He had posited to us, hey, have you ever thought of doing a Twitter space? Which, you know, those of you listening who are Twitter savvy, it's basically just like an audio chat room. And the way we do it is pretty much like internet radio, I guess. So it's kind of fun in that way, in that people can just join up and either listen or request to talk and actually ask questions or just banter with us. So we did that one, and that first one was really fun, and Duke hopped in. And then Duke kind of made a show out of it and you know, was gracious enough to invite us along, and Joe Rodriguez too from the Striker. So on away match days, that's kind of what we'll try to do. Kind of like pregame, halftime, postgame shows, and it's a lot of fun. So if you're ever on Twitter and you see the little like purple thing in the corner, that's us, and just hop in.
Yeah, it is cool, like the live nature of it, it's pretty free form in the way it's done, but it is run by such a pro in Duke Keith. Like, he is he is just so professional in the way he carries it out. Sound bites. He's got interview little hits. He's got calls from his own commentary of games, edited in little compilations or whatever. So, it's really well done. And I think,
For sure.
I think the idea of it being for those away days where we are kind of, you know, we're either at watch parties, we're all kind of separated, you know, for the most part at home games, everybody is gathered and there is this sense of kind of community around Southwest University Park. But this can kind of be the spot to hang out, like think of it as like, I guess like the pregame bar, you know, crawl, or the pregame, you know,
and Duke and Duke and Joe are actually at the bars that host the Locomotive watch parties. So they are literally at the bar. And if you were there last night at Flips, you probably saw them on their laptops and doing the whole thing. So yeah, and you're right. It's so professional the way Duke does it. That's why I hesitate to call it like an audio chat room, because with him, it's actually like an internet radio show. And so it's just so much fun to be a part of. So that's where you can catch us on away days if the podcast is not enough to satiate your craving for Locomotive content, I suppose.
We need to find a way to to pump the audio into Bombers for the Eighth Notch watch parties as well. No, but yeah, so we've been trying to keep up a little bit with that, but I think at the end of the day, like we're happy to be back. We're happy to be back in the podcast feed. You guys know, most of you know where to find us, but if you're finding us for the first time, Seriously Loco, you can find us on all the major podcast platforms. I listen to our podcast on Spotify. That's where I find it and make sure that it posts and make sure that it is sounding good. But you can find it on any platform out there. And you can find us on social media at Seriously Loco. And yeah, we're back into it, hopefully back into, some sort of regularity of posting, and just really excited about this busy period for Locomotive. We have a lot to talk about with the draw against New Mexico. We've got a Copa Tejas match against San Antonio coming up here in a road situation that has not been super kind to Locomotive previously, and then we've got some listener questions at the end. But as I said, Locomotive headed into a busy stretch, Mikka, and as such, they've brought in some reinforcements. We saw the loan out of Niall Logue at center back, and now we have actually loaned in Matty Lewis from an unlikely source in NISA champions Detroit City FC. So Mark looking outside of the USL for help at that center back position through this busy July period.
Yeah, it was really fascinating when this one came across the feed, because I think Christian actually commented about it in our Seriously Loco chat. It was like, hey, they're right. We only have one center back. Yeah. So the move makes sense for that purpose, because really the only like out and out center half we have right now is Mishak. Yuma does, a great job back there, but yeah. It makes sense that the fixtures are piling up, and we could use some cover there, having loaned out now, like you said. But the Detroit City FC part of it is really interesting, because I think this is the first time we've ever grabbed a player from NISA, and actually I think it's Detroit City's first ever loan out. So there's a lot of like, this is a historical move, as like maybe innocuous as it may seem in the grand scheme of things, but it's an interesting, unique move for both sides. And having a look at the player himself, I mean, if Transfermarkt is to be believed, in 13 appearances for DCFC in all competitions, so that's, regular season play and in the Legends Cup, he's never lost. So, right. I mean, that speaks to the strength of Detroit City. They're one of the best, or if not the best side, at that level of the game. And then, of course, in their championship winning, their title winning game, he was man of the match. So, I mean, this is a decent player that we're getting here. And one who's, not unaccustomed to this level. I think he's played at Swoke Park Rangers. I think he's played at Cosmos. So, interesting cover. It's a short loan, I think, until August 1st. So he's got like 2 opportunities to play. Yep. So I think we'll be seeing him rather soon.
Yeah, I'd be surprised if we don't see him in some capacity, with it being so short term, to give Yuma and Mishak a little bit of a break. I think we've seen, Matt Boehner used in that sort of a role, but Boehner not in the 18 for this last match. And I have to think maybe it's because he's going to start in San Antonio. That's my thought. If I haven't heard any fitness concerns, but Matt Lewis was on the bench against New Mexico. And I wouldn't be shocked if he was involved against San Antonio, even as a planned substitute, like we've seen previously, where Yuma played the first 45 and then was substituted against Real Monarchs, I believe. Yeah, so it's an interesting move. I personally love any time that these moves happen outside of the traditional kind of setup, because in a broader sense, I just think it means that U.S. soccer is becoming, like, the clubs are becoming more serious, if that makes sense. Right. Like, the clubs are actually looking out and seeing value in, not just in, I'm in the USL system, so I'm going to look to USL players. I'm going to look to whatever, former USL players or what have you. I think all of these moves just legitimize the different clubs around US soccer, and Detroit City is coming off a fantastic season, and I kind of think of it as the Logan move to MLS, where he got this chance to kind of show himself at a little bit higher level. And so now Matt Lewis gets that opportunity just because of what a good job he's done for Detroit. So it's a pretty cool move in that sense. And obviously super short term, where, he's seen the exit door in about 6 days. So it's a little bit awkward, but I'm interested to see if he can make an impact for us and maybe take a little bit of heat off of some of these guys who are going to be playing a lot in this busy stretch.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm sure we'll get into it as we start talking about the match against New Mexico, but I think there are people in that back line, despite the fact that we got a clean sheet, that could maybe use a rest. So we'll get onto that, I'm sure.
Well, we may as well dive right in. It was a derby day, and Mikka, I mean, in terms of derbies, New Mexico and El Paso have often matched that kind of like intensity, or those games have felt like derbies, I think, in the truest sense. This very much felt like what Mark Lowry might have felt a derby day might have felt like in terms of the physicality of this match, like broken up throughout, a lot of tackles flying in, a lot of gamesmanship going on. And so what did you make of this 0-0 on the road for Locomotive in what was traditionally not a happy hunting ground, as we've said for Locomotive, not a place that they played particularly well in the past, but just a point with a man advantage. Taking all of this into account, what did you make of this result for Locomotive?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I mean, we spoke with Duke and Joe on Loco Spaces at halftime, and Joe asked, who would be signing off on a 0-0. And you and I both said no. We would like the 3 points. Yep. Because at that point, we were the better side. We were playing better football, despite the fact that New Mexico was not interested in playing football. Let's just put that out there. There was fouls and shocking tackles flying in pretty much from the first whistle. But we still managed, I thought, to be the better side in the first half. So I think you and I were both kind of on that same wavelength of like, no, we're the better footballing side right now. We wouldn't be happy with a draw, and of course, much less a loss. But second half, definitely a different vibe to it. I think New Mexico, I mean, it's not that they dominated necessarily. I think they were better. I think they were better in terms of moving the ball and actually trying to create and actually try to pounce on some of our mistakes. But when they go down to 10 men, and we've seen Locomotive fans say this as well, I mean, you kind of need to adjust to that situation and take advantage of it. I mean, it came late, first of all. Juan Guzman should have been off well before that, arguably. Yeah. But it did finally come. The referee did finally give us the man advantage that we should have had much earlier. And I was just disappointed to see that we didn't make changes that would have exploited some of the space that opened up, or tactically tweak things to win it. I think it did look like at about 70 minutes that we were happy with, just going home and not losing. And I don't know. I'm not a big fan of that, because I just think that this iteration of New Mexico United is not great. I mean, we've in the past when this team has beaten us, it's been the Chris Weehans and the Devin Sandoval's and the Santi Moraes that have terrorized us. This New Mexico United is nowhere near that kind of that iteration of New Mexico United that had a lot of attacking talent. I think we are a much better side, and it's kind of disappointing that we didn't get to take advantage of what I thought were a lot of favorable decisions our way. And of course, then the red card, we just didn't really do much with that. And the changes were at like the 85th minute, something like that. So yeah, it's a little bit disappointing, but at the same time, hard to argue or be mad about not losing away, So to our rival, it's kind of I go back and forth with it.
Yeah, I think in the context of, it's a weird one. Like in the context of the season, it's a good point. In the context of the match, I'm not happy with the point, if that makes sense. Like if I narrow my view down to this match and take it without any context, then I'm saying, yeah, it's not, this is a wasted opportunity. I think in the context of the season, any point in Albuquerque is probably a good one. I think it depends how we show up in the next match in Albuquerque. You know, if we look back and say, oh gosh, if we had only grabbed those 3 points when we had a man advantage for 40 minutes in Albuquerque the first time around, then this would be a different season. You know, if we're looking back and regretting this, then obviously the season hasn't gone the way that we expected to from here on out. If we're ruining these couple of points, but I think in the context of the night, I really agree with you that it felt like an opportunity to really step up and kind of like step on their necks, you know, and just like really drive home the advantage and just assert the fact that we're a better team than they are this year. And that I think that's been debated season over season. I think now it's clear like who the better team is. And unfortunately we couldn't make it count in a material way on the scoreboard.
Yeah, for sure. What about the lineup though? Like, do we think that the starting lineup had anything to do with it? Because I thought the lineup was very interesting when it dropped.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting one because we saw a familiar shape in that it looked like, and I know, you know, it gets listed out different ways, but I'm pretty confident that we were in our kind of 4-4-2 diamond. It seemed like, you know, that midfield trio of Richie, Nick, and Chapa were interchanging well, especially early on. I think the only questionable thing from Mark's perspective is we have seen, you know, Diego and Dylan start together, and we've thought about, hey, like, is this a good interchange? I think we've seen it work in spurts and not work in spurts. I think the thing that made me question the choice of, or the inclusion of, I mean, and you can pick and choose, like you could say Velasquez or Diego, in terms of who you would replace if Mark went to his more traditional, like 4-4-2, and played a second striker with Lucho. I would say against this edition of New Mexico United and the relative weakness, particularly against people running in behind, as we saw against San Antonio FC. I mean, Nogasa just absolutely torched them when they played balls like between the lines. I think Josue Aron Gomez should have started. And that's simply because of him being able to play off the shoulder of Tete, of, you know, someone like Tete, and isolate like that back three a little bit. If Lucho could take up Kalen Ryden and he could, you know, make the run off of it and maybe get a flick on, whatever. But the way Diego and Sebastian like linked up on the night, they aren't the type. I mean, Diego did it a couple of times, like when we had the ball in and around the box, where he made that run in behind to try to latch onto something, but we never really tried to get someone behind, like in behind from midfield, if that makes sense. And yeah, so I think overall the only question I have about this lineup, because I think a lot of this is driven by fitness, like the inclusion of Zacharias, which, I mean, he's been like very good, don't get me wrong, but I think we know that Maka King starts there if healthy, or if fully fit. But the one question I'm left thinking is, like, should maybe Gomez have started and then Sebastian Velasquez been able to, you know, if we're in need of something late on, been brought on and maybe added that bit of flair and creativity. But I think Gomez, the way that he's able to make those runs, he's often the one ending up on the end of, any flick-ons or through balls. And he just seems to get in those type of areas. So against this New Mexico defense, I would have liked to see Aron for a longer period of time.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say if not starting, at least coming on much sooner, i.e., right when the red card came, possibly even before that. But we didn't see Josue and Leandro Carrijo until much later when the game was, to me, a foregone conclusion. I find it hard to disagree with anything you said there. And the interesting thing with Sebastian Velasquez in this one, and again, we spoke about this with Duke on Local Spaces, and with Joe, is, nominally he lines up in the same line with Lucho Soldignac, and I kind of said I don't think that's really what's going to happen. I think he's going to drop deep and try to link play. And there were times where he was kind of like in line with Richie almost, and it was very like kind of bizarre. And because he's someone that wants to get on the ball and influence the play, and that's fine, and we like that about him, obviously. But Lucho was definitely isolated up there. There was no I didn't feel like there was a natural partner for his play. Kind of like you said with Josue, there would have been like this opportunity for like hold up play, and maybe he can get the flick on, and big man, little man kind of thing. Like, it's all very cliche, but for good reason. Yeah. I think Seb left that area of the pitch a lot, which we expected, but perhaps to Lucho's detriment, and perhaps to the overall team play, I suppose. And it makes me wonder, like, what assurances have been given to the player, because I think he's started pretty regularly, right? I think
since he rejoined, he came off the bench in the first one, and then he's started since then, I think. So
right. And Mark was unequivocal about how tonight he is playing through a pain barrier, which I find that very fascinating too, because he did take a pretty significant knock to the ribs, and Mark was pretty clear about he's going to play through it. And it's like, okay,
right.
I don't know that, I'm not accusing Mark of like not having his player's best interest at heart. Obviously not. I just think that speaks to perhaps the thinness of the squad right now. It's been put to us that, there's like this illness going through the locker room, and then injuries here and there. Not COVID, luckily.
Yeah.
But guys are just not feeling well. And now with this fixture pile up, it's just going to be fascinating to see kind of how we deal with that. But I don't know. We might even see more loans than just Matt Lewis.
When I saw this lineup, I think even more than the players who were included, the thing that struck me the most was the fact that Dylan and Brian Rebillon are not in the 18, and they had been suffering from this like mystery illness, like most recently. So that really concerned me, because obviously I think we spoke about it like in our group chat, and I think it's common knowledge to Locomotive fans now. Like, this is, and you could see from Mark's reaction in the 2-1 win at Southwest University Park, like, his reaction at full time tells you everything that you need to know about what he thinks of this fixture. And that is like, this is the biggest match that we play. When we play New Mexico United, like, it's a rivalry, but it is also against, like, nominally our direct rival for the Mountain Division, aside from RGV at the moment. So I just feel that whenever someone's not included, it has to be because they are literally not fit enough to play. And the fact that Sebastian Velasquez is playing through a pain barrier to play in this game, and two of our best players, didn't travel for it because of fitness issues, like, that is it just makes me wonder, like, what are their long-term prospects? And we could, it could be that on Wednesday they trot out onto the field against San Antonio, and that was just always the plan for them to, sit this one out so they could make the trip to San Antonio. But I just don't know that, like, Mark's obviously, at the end of the day, he's a pragmatist and he needs to get results. But the idea that two of your best players are sitting at home watching a road derby, like, that is, to me, it just speaks to they weren't available because those guys would have been involved if they were fit.
Yeah, I mean, look no further than our bench on the night for evidence of a quickly thinning squad. Joel Maldonado, the 17-year-old from the youth academy, is on the bench in a road derby. I mean, I've never seen the player play, so I'm not speaking on that at all. It's just like, wow, if you got a literal youth academy guy, who may have to come in, who is part of the squad, the playing squad, and so that's just, congratulations to him. Obviously, that's huge, and it shows that they trust him at least in this kind of a situation, and not just not relying on the loan markets, primarily. But yeah, seeing a kid on the bench for a road derby was really interesting. He doesn't make his debut, but I wonder if that's going to become the norm, because if you look at again, Transfermarkt, they get a lot of things wrong, but there are some things that are scary accurate. And if you look at our roster, there are more youth academy players now on there, so including Joel. So that's the only way I knew about that. And there's like 3 or 4 of them that are now part of, I guess, the first team squad.
One of the interesting things about this matchup, so as we said, the midfield started out as Richie, Nick, and Chapa. At halftime, Mark makes a switch, brings on Jose Aguinaga, and it flew under the radar so much that, I noticed watching at home that Aguinaga came on at halftime, but the commentators didn't mention it. I don't think they even said anything.
I don't think they knew.
They just said at one point, they called Aguinaga's name, not remembering that he had not started the match. Obviously, I think this is another planned change. It felt like a planned change, but in practice, it actually led to a change of shape from Mark. And a lot of what was effective about the way that we controlled the midfield in the first half, with Chapa winning the ball back a lot, Chapa winning a lot of fouls, winning a lot of free kicks off of Daniel Bruce in particular, on that left-hand side of the field. When we brought on Jose, we shifted into almost like a 4-2-3-1 with Nick and Richie playing as a double pivot, Aguinaga basically playing as a winger out on the left, trying to link up with Eder. But a little bit of that control was conceded, it seemed. And it, I hate to point to one thing as the reason that the match went a certain way, but it did seem like that substitution at halftime directly impacted Locomotive's ability to control the game.
Yeah, 100%. I think midfield was more or less kind of lost after that for vast majorities of the second half. And I don't know. I can't even particularly point to one reason other than the change. And I don't remember Jose having any groundbreaking impact. I mean, he wasn't terrible by any means, but I just thought that Chapa, the way that we were using him, was working to perfection. I said to you at the very beginning, if Chapa can just win fouls like this all night, we'll be in good shape, because they're gonna foul us in an area that they cannot defend over and over again. And I thought it was working brilliantly. I mean, he was doing really well at shielding the ball from Daniel Bruce and Juan Guzman and all of them. And I don't know. I thought he was working really hard. We spoke about it at halftime with Duke and Joe, and it was just really weird. I don't know. I didn't see if he took a knock or anything, or if it was just tactical. I think thinking back, in hindsight, maybe the idea was for someone with a little bit more technical security to come onto the pitch. But I don't know that this fixture really warranted that. I think it was always going to be attritional, and I thought Chapa was more suited to that. So nothing against Jose, obviously, but it was a weird one for me.
Yeah, I think it's not even necessarily Jose in particular. I think it was what Jose was being asked to do that ended up leading to the change, because I think Jose is very capable, obviously technically good player. And I think given the instruction, like he could certainly do the job that Chapa was doing out there. Chapa was, we joked that as New Mexico United handed out construction hats or hard hats in the stands, Chapa was in his element, the former construction worker. As is often pointed out. But no, I think like the space that Chapa was taking up was so particularly good against what New Mexico tries to do in this setup, which like it's obvious to me that there are 5 people on the field that New Mexico and Troy Lesane like want to have the ball at any given time. And it is Bruce, Suggs, Rivas, Illich, and Martinez, and that's it. The other 6 players on the field are not asked to have the ball at any given point, are not asked to carry the ball. He doesn't even really want Tenari and Guzman to like be involved in a material way, like in possession. I think Tenari is asked to be like on the edge of the box and link up play a little bit. But I think in an ideal world, those fullbacks that are the wing backs really, because they're playing in a back 3 with those wing backs of Bruce and Suggs. I think they're being asked to carry the ball through midfield like more often than not. And Chapa occupying Bruce and frustrating Bruce to the point of he's giving away like 6-7 fouls in a half. And giving the ball away, like any loose touch, Chapa's closing him down. Like it completely disrupted the way that New Mexico tried to break out and tried to get like advance the ball through midfield. So when Jose came on without that like mandate of like, hey, you're closing down everything, you're chasing down everything. Like Jose was brought on, I think, to be an attacking change. And I think that was the goal, was to change the shape and get another body like in advanced areas. But in practice, it actually led to us just having less control. And in a game like this, as you said, that does end up being attritional. It ends up being a detriment because the thing that would have ultimately led to a goal for Locomotive, given the way that we were playing in the first half, was just the pressure, winning the ball back like in good areas.
Yeah.
Like, it was never going to be us putting together some like scything move or anything like that. It was us like putting passes together, keeping the pressure on, and eventually like looking for those opportunities because New Mexico weren't interested. Like when we tried to break, they would foul us. Like when we tried to string a bunch of passes together, like we were going to get fouled. Like that was the nature of the game. What we did in the first half worked in that we kept them from getting out, kept them from breaking like in any dangerous way aside from the moment with Illich in the first half where he blazes over the bar from the Yuma like miss kick. But yeah, I mean overall like we kept them penned in a game where they're trying to frustrate you, they're trying to keep you from putting anything together. I thought that was our best way, just building pressure through like set pieces, those free kicks, corners, whatever. Like eventually that pressure felt like it was going to tell. And it was pressure that was released like by the change of shape in the second half, even when New Mexico United go down to 10.
Yeah, absolutely. Speaking of the Illich chance from Yuma's miscue, do we, because it doesn't feel like it, like in the cold light of day, to be honest, and maybe that's just my homerism talking, but like looking back, do we actually think maybe we got away with one? Because I think a better New Mexico United side probably scores 2 goals on the night. Like the 2 chances they had were pretty good chances, and they were because of our mistakes. And I think a Kevon Frater like season 1 New Mexico side could have had 3.
Yeah, Chris Weehan as well, because the Yuma miss kick in the first half leads to an Illich chance. He blazes over the bar, and then a similar chance in the second half. Illich gets on the end of a little like move, gets past Yuma, and Ketterer makes a really good save down to his right, and then the Suggs chance that Ketterer like touches onto the bar. I think unfortunately, looking at it, as you said, in the cold light of day, like there's a world where we lose this 3-0 and we can't have like too many complaints because we didn't create like anything very dangerous, and the couple of saves we asked Tambakis to make were pretty routine.
Yeah.
I think our best chance of the game was actually ended in a blocked shot because Luna, I think he was unfortunate to hit the foot of Austin Yearwood with his shot. Yeah. A little bit of luck from Yearwood there, but that was our best chance of the game, and we certainly didn't force Tambakis to do anything better than what Ketterer did on the night, which was he came up with a couple of really good ones.
Yeah. Definitely. I thought, to be fair, too, I have to mention that I think Kalen Ryden really did a good job of keeping Lucho Solignac quiet. He's just, he's a pro. I mean, a pro, a winner in this league, very experienced, and Lucho just did not. He cut a pretty sad figure out there, I think, just not too much service and really not opportunities for shots.
Yeah.
Keelan did really well at kind of like, shepherding him to like wide areas where he didn't want to be, like kind of by the corner flag and stuff, and not falling for any of the shoulder dips and things like that. So, I mean, if we're on the other side, we might be a bit frustrated as a New Mexico United fan, because there's some chances in there. I think we had more chances, but they had better ones.
Yeah.
if I could put it that way.
Sure. There is one chance that I left out for Locomotive.
More chances.
Right. There is one chance I left out for Locomotive that was actually pretty good, and I blocked it out in my mind only because it ends in a goal kick for New Mexico United, which I'm not sure how. But Lucho gets in behind and tries to take on a shot, and Kalen Ryden makes a really good tackle to take it behind. And the referee gave a goal kick for that, which, the referee is a topic of conversation, like often for us. I guess it's not often that we're on the right side of these, or like the favorable side.
Yeah.
So what did you make of, I mean, we spoke about Guzman's like the yellow he got earlier in the game for his tackle on Sebastian Velasquez, arguably a red. And I think you'd have a pretty strong case. If that happens a little bit later in the game, I think he probably does see red. Nowhere near the ball, high, through the back of the player, just like reckless. Not really anything. All of the boxes checked for a red card, but he does get a yellow. The red card he did get, though, for the handball in midfield, which ends up being given, I think, by the fourth official in conversation with the center referee. What did you make of Juan Pablo Guzman's second yellow and subsequent sending off?
I mean, I can certainly see why United fans might be a bit annoyed with that one, because he is slide tackling, and it looks like his, like, I don't know, the arm that you use for like balance in that situation is what touches the ball. But as is often the case with Juan Pablo Guzman, he's not going for the ball with his feet. So,
right.
If the fourth official interpreted that to mean that he's touching the ball intentionally, playing the ball intentionally, and you could make that case too, for what we were able to see, then, fair enough. And I think the referee, his failure was not sending him off sooner. Because I think there were more egregious plays that Guzman made that he definitely should have seen a second yellow or maybe even a straight red for, namely the studs into the back of Sebastian Velasquez's calves. So, I think by the letter of the law, like he has to go, but I can see how it's annoying because it's like physics, but also you don't get into that situation if you're trying to like win the ball, honestly.
Yeah, I think it's a weird situation because the handball itself, he's pretty close to Sebastian as he tries to flick it over him. And I totally understand like that argument in terms of his proximity and like, oh, what is he supposed to do? Like, is he supposed to not have arms sort of thing? Cause that's often the argument with handball. When it comes close. For me though, I think Guzman has enough of a body of work where the idea of him sliding in and putting his arm up to block a potential, like a ball that maybe goes, through to another player or launches a counterattack. It's not dissimilar to like it's a tactical foul. So that's where it starts to cross the line into yellow card, like second yellow territory for me, because you could say like, you can say deliberate handball and you can try to dissect the intent of a player for hours and hours and hours. Like, you could have the sports psychologists and the lip readers out like to see if he meant it. But the bottom line is that Velasquez is about to go past him. And the only reason he doesn't is because he commits a handball in midfield. So to me, it equals a tactical foul, and therefore, like, he's always in danger of being sent off. Because if he brings Velasquez down in that scenario, he also would have been sent off, whether it was meant or not. And ultimately, the result was the same. So to me, yeah, I think... especially given the fact that like it does clearly hit his hand. It does like, and I get that it was a close proximity. But yeah, I don't know that. I think there's always a chance it's given. And given the fact that he probably should have been off already, like I'm not really too worried about it. New Mexico fans really shouldn't be that upset about the sending off anyways, because honestly, they were better after he was gone. And in the 20 minutes, following the red card, I think the effect felt almost opposite, where it felt like New Mexico was the more likely to score.
Yeah, well, and he'd been talked to several times. Daniel Bruce had been talked to several times. I think it's interesting because you could say that we got a lot of favorable calls, and I don't think we typically do in USL, but. The referee did not control the match well, period.
Yeah.
And it seemed like he was scared to give cards. Mm-hmm. And New Mexico United felt emboldened by that, and we're just flying in. And Daniel Bruce was, he's a little more, how do I say this? Like Guzman is very like obvious, like there's no like nuance whatsoever to his game. You know what's gonna happen. I think Daniel Bruce is a little more clever, as they might say in his home country of England. But I saw it. I saw him kick Richie Ryan in the calf. We saw him foul Chapa Herrera multiple times.
Yeah.
Just a very cynical player, and I'm surprised he made it through the match, to be honest. I don't think he had any one instance that was as bad as like Guzman, but altogether there's a case, right, that maybe he should have gone. But
and it feels like each week we have home commentators who are actually calling out their own player for getting away with accumulation. A couple of weeks ago, it was Real Monarchs and our like Shithouse 11 Hall of Fame inductee. Holy crap. Wait, why can't I remember his name? It's too hot.
I can't remember him in my mind's eye. Yeah.
I'm going to have to look that up because it's going to bother me. But Daniel Bruce is cut from the same cloth, where I think like the expectation is that he would be in the book, and even their home commentators, who obviously were shocked at the sending off of Guzman and all of that, like they were even saying like, oh, Daniel Bruce, like that's his 8th or 9th foul. Like it's at this point, he's like walking on eggshells. But he clearly like has a way of just.
Well, and then I think he gets taken off, right?
Yeah, he does. Like towards the end.
At the end of the day, Troy Lesane was like, yeah, I'm just going to not do that.
Yeah. But despite a frustrating game, I mean, overall, like, as you said, the control of the game could be called into question from the referee. 16 fouls from New Mexico United in the first half alone. They end the game with 23, which obviously they didn't need to foul quite as much. But I do think there was an element of evening out that occurred after the red card. I think the referee like starts to call it a little bit the other way at that point, because Locomotive in the second half, it was New Mexico had 7 and El Paso had 12 fouls in the second half. So after having just 2 in the first, so I think it felt like the referee just trying to do some like correcting, or feeling like maybe he had given New Mexico like the short end of the stick. So either way, a frustrating day, a 0-0 draw, and ultimately just a shared point between the teams. El Paso Locomotive sitting back at the top of the Mountain Division as it stands, due to RGV finding a late equalizer against Austin Bold. Austin Bold finding a late equalizer against RGV was why RGV didn't climb back above. And that was a 10-man Austin Bold that equalized in the 85th minute through Javi Baez. So as it stands, having played 12 matches, Locomotive still top on 25 points with a +8 goal difference, which is 2 better than RGV, who are in second, but RGV has played 2 matches more and are level on points. So still a good opportunity for Locomotive to build a little bit of a gap in there. New Mexico United sit third with 21 points, having played 3 more matches than Locomotive. So 3 games in hand over New Mexico still. So maybe that's Mark's thinking, is like, we've got some good distance here and a point on the road against this New Mexico team, which has shown it's prone to the odd shocking result. Maybe that's his thought, is we've got some room here, and no need to risk it.
Right. And if the squad's as thin as it appears, then maybe it isn't so bad after all. But yeah.
Well, we've got San Antonio coming up. San Antonio is the next squad on the docket. We have to go to San Antonio to play this match. Toyota Field. It is
pitch
still
is looking better than the last time we were there.
Those who will remember this, the time we went there in the first season, where we played on the beaches of San Antonio. It was a little bit of a weird one. I think the San Antonio, like us against San Antonio, it's obviously a mixed bag. We have a win against them, a draw against them, and a loss against them. And the loss actually came at Southwest University Park.
Right.
And that was a pretty poor performance, I think, overall from Locomotive, and what was a very odd stretch from them in the inaugural season. But San Antonio stumbled out of the gates, but now it's looking like they put up a good performance against New Mexico United. They've won a couple of games in a row. This is a big opportunity for San Antonio to continue this climb, and we have to face them at home, having just been in Albuquerque.
Absolutely. It's massive. I mean, all the other Mountain Division fixtures arguably went their way as well, on top of having this 2-game winning streak. I mean, they'll be looking to climb up in the Mountain Division. It's a weird one because San Antonio is like nominally the closest to us in Texas, and yet they feel so unknown.
Yeah.
They're like kind of unknown compared. The sample size is much smaller than the likes of, Bold and Phoenix and all them. It's just weird that we haven't really gotten to play them all too much. But I mean, this squad is very talented. I think the issue with them this season has been injuries. Lots of injuries, lots of people, in the thrashing against New Mexico on national TV the other night, which I very, very much enjoyed. There were a lot of players making debuts or just coming on, not having really been in the first team picture, but for the injuries. So I think it's impressive what they've been able to put together in this short little run, having all those issues to contend with. But as we know, San Antonio have multiple attacking threats. Santiago Patino, I think he's already got 5 goals, looking like one of the signings of the season, maybe alongside Haji Berry in Colorado. Nathan Fagasa going off right now.
Yeah.
The Brazilian is. Incredible player. Jose Gallegos as well, the youngster, making a very good impact as that playmaker behind all those attacking talents. And then, of course, you have the monster 6'4" that is Justin Dillon to come off the bench and score some goals for you. And he has scored, I think, 3. So very top heavy team. And there'll be a lot to contend with. And I think, again, that's informing kind of like our incomings right now with the addition of Matt Lewis. I think we'll need to be very stout defensively to deal with them. But yeah, they've. Can I just say, too, though, like while I was doing my research about this team, and maybe this kid was added because of the injuries, but they have a 17-year-old named Abraham Lincoln. I'm not joking. Abraham Lincoln, like Lincon. Maybe it's like Lincoln. I don't know.
Yeah. That is, if I had to guess, is he Brazilian?
I mean, like, that would check out. Let me see. SAFC.
Brazilians love naming their kids after American founding fathers, and I don't know why.
No, he's from San Antonio. he's from San Antonio. He's a Mexican American.
Wow.
Yeah, his name is Abraham Lincoln. He's a center forward, 17 years old.
That's amazing.
I'm sorry. That's just amazing. It is amazing. I had to let you know.
I think, like, of all of the names that are out there, obviously Fagasa has had his name up in lights recently. He had a brace against Switchbacks in San Antonio's 3-2 win against Switchbacks, and then he had another brace against New Mexico United, and a couple of really good strikers goals against New Mexico United. But the thing that stuck out to me about the United match was that Jose Gallegos was unplayable. Like, he was absolutely he was unbelievable. He was all over the field. He was picking the ball up in midfield, carrying it, going past players, playing through balls, getting to the byline, crossing. Like, he gets 2 assists and a goal of his own, which the finish for his goal too was a little bit ridiculous and maybe a little bit of tired legs in the 93rd minute, but finishes with his left, like a nice little curling effort after dribbling into the box. And I think the key about this game, like if you want to boil it down to one thing, it's going to be absolutely critical that Locomotive contain Gallegos because everything went through him. Right. He was just unstoppable against United the way they set up. They were particularly, I guess, set up to be picked apart by this setup. And the way that Gallegos can kind of drift around and be a little bit hard to pin down in terms of like his positioning and where he's going to pick up the ball and where he's going to pop up. Like, yeah, there's something about that kid. He's unbelievable. And I think, we have seen the impact of young players and some of this new generation coming up through USL, and Gallegos is one of the best of that crop. It's just going to be on his day, he can be a complete game changer, and it's going to be really incumbent on Locomotive to make sure that he's not on Wednesday night.
Yeah, absolutely. Jose Gallegos. I mean, shout out San Antonio, by the way, because he too is from San Antonio, Texas. So it's cool to see that the club is really fostering local talent. But yeah, I mean, he was a finalist for USL Championship Young Player of the Year last season. He spent a couple weeks training with Bayern Munich earlier in the season. So I mean, he's a serious player. Only 19 years old. He's already got like 40 plus appearances for San Antonio FC. So he's not exactly a spring chicken, despite his age. So, yeah, definitely one to keep an eye on. He's going to be hard to track. I mean, I think midfield is going to have to do a job as a unit. Like, I don't think we can necessarily put just one guy on him. He's going to be one that a unit needs to contain. So, yeah, that's a good shout.
So, yeah, I think to boil it down, that is the going to be the goal for Locomotive. I guess the next question is, what changes or what kind of things do you expect Mark to do in setting up not only for that threat but also to kind of turn things around at the other end, because we had the 1-0 win against Vegas. We have the 0-0 in New Mexico. Goal scoring, obviously a hot button issue around Locomotive fans all the time. But right now, it seeming like maybe the goals are drying up a little bit. What would you do to remedy that?
I think it's really crucial that we get some players back, because I mean it's all a bit pedestrian right now without the Bryams and the Dylans, and Diego. He's beyond reproach. Like, he's incredible, but I mean, he's also 17. And I hate that we're having to like kind of look to him to make something happen out of nothing. So hopefully we just get players back and we have a bit more options tactically. But getting Lucho back into play is going to be very important too, because I think they saw what he did to, who was it that he scored the one that he like turned around and fired really quick,
Monarchs.
Like, was that Real Monarchs?
Yeah.
I think people looked at that game and said, yeah, he cannot have that much time on the ball.
Right.
I think United must have looked at that and Kalen Ryden completely marked him out of the game. So getting him back into positions with time on the ball is going to be, I think, crucial. And it might be that we don't pair him with Sebastian Velasquez. I think the pairing with Mahrez has worked better with Mahrez and Diego Luna interchanging and kind of being the 10 or like being with Lucho to link up, taking turns doing that. So, yeah, we'll have to see. I mean, I'm not expecting us to score multiple goals here, but yeah, just hoping for more options.
Yeah, I think we have to be a little less predictable this time out. And you would think the inclusion of a couple of attacking midfielders would kind of lead to that, but I think ultimately we're going to need to give them something to think about. And with them traditionally, like with San Antonio traditionally lining up in a back four, I think maybe it gives us more of an opportunity to to play two up top and to give both center backs something to think about, with that 10 then providing the additional threat. And then I think the other thing that I'd really like to see, and I don't think we saw that much against New Mexico, is involvement of the fullbacks like in the attack. I think they were pinned back a little bit by the wingbacks of United. So, especially I think we saw Mikka, like, it looked like he was being readied to come on against United very, very late. Don't get me wrong. But it looked like he was kind of up and animated, like on the sidelines. So I'd be very interested about his fitness, and maybe we do see Mikka King reintroduced against San Antonio. And I think him and Adair obviously could, provide a little bit of another challenge for San Antonio to deal with.
Yeah, that's a really fair point about the difference that United using wingbacks made to our wide play, because you didn't see any of those far post crosses that got Eda Borelli into Team of the Week up there in Albuquerque the other night. So, yeah, I welcome the opportunity to play what I think is a much superior side to New Mexico United, actually, the table notwithstanding,
right,
but perhaps tactically more suited to our game.
So the question is, and we'll have the updates on our pick'em and all of these things. Christian's the keeper of the documents, but the question now, Mikka, is what do you see for this one, and which way do you see it going?
Yeah, I don't know. I never want to pick a loss, and I don't think we'll lose, but I don't know that I don't know. I just don't see us scoring that much either. So I might go 1-1, draw on the road, because we're in San Antonio, right? Yeah, we're in San Antonio. Yeah. So 1-1 on the road, and I'm hoping that Gomez is either starting or involved a lot sooner and can grab a goal for us.
Yeah, I think it's tough with the way that San Antonio's been scoring. It's tough to pick a clean sheet against them because they have the hot hand right now. I think, and I'm also kind of gaming this from a personality perspective, because I think Christian's going to pick us to draw also. He might actually pick us to lose. I don't know. No, I think
because he's a San Antonio spy.
I'll go.
Interests.
I think the only way that we win this is to keep a clean sheet. So I will differentiate in that way, and I will say 1-0, and it'll be Lucho against his former club, because Mark loves the narrative. So, but I want to put a disclaimer on that, in that I think that if San Antonio score, I think we're going to have a hard time winning the game. I think the only way that we win is if we somehow shut them down. I think we're capable of it, but I think 1-0 is the only way we're making it out of there with the 3 points, because if they get firing, I worry about us a little bit, and I think it could go the direction of the RGV game, unfortunately.
Okay. Interesting. Okay. I think that makes a lot of sense, because I think we've gotten better about not letting heads drop when we concede, but I still wouldn't bet the house on it or anything. So
right.
That makes a lot of sense.
Well, that is where we stand headed into the SAFC game. I think it'll be a good one for sure, and just a good opportunity. I love that USL has the opportunity to do a Diego versus Diego Luna, Jose Gallegos, young gun sort of narrative in this one.
The marquee. It's
a pretty cool situation to be in, to have one of these bright young talents. But they come up against each other in Central Texas on Wednesday night. It'll be a massive, massive game. And I think big in our quest. I mean, ultimately, I think it's about breaking up San Antonio's momentum, because right now they're building up ahead of steam and still a lot of season left. So with the division as tight as it is, still a lot of opportunity for San Antonio to be up and about, up and around the upper reaches of the table come the end of the season. But that is where we stand headed into Wednesday, and I think, Mikka, do you want to take a quick break and we'll come back and answer some listener questions and then probably get out of here? Welcome back to Seriously Loco, everyone. It's time to round things out with the listener questions, Mikka, and we had a handful, but this first one is a little bit of a doozy because it goes into a lot more than just a simple listener question. And the question itself came from Eric Bauer at eBow27, and he posited thoughts on the proposed promotion and relegation and calendar changes for USL. This was all part of an announcement that Jake Edwards made, and it was reported on by Jeff Reuter of The Athletic. A few big changes potentially on the horizon for USL, targeting, according to Jake Edwards, 2026 to be the goal date for a lot of these changes to be implemented by the time the World Cup is in North America. But the things that were mostly outlined were internal promotion and relegation between USL Championship and League One, and potentially, in the future League Two and all this stuff. But also a calendar change to follow and align more so with the European calendar, with the season starting in August and going into, the following June with a winter break, Germany style, and a mini preseason in the middle of that break. But perhaps the biggest change was something that's been on the horizon for a little while: MLS2 teams making the switch to MLS's reserve league or D3 league, whatever they're calling it. And all of the MLS2 sides will be out at the end of the 2022 seasons, with most of them done actually after this season. So some pretty big changes on the horizon for USL. What did you make of this announcement from USL and Jake Edwards?
I mean, it's hard not to be excited by the prospect of promotion, relegation, possible changes to the calendar, and things that just help grow USL Championship. Like I said, when we spoke with Duke and Joe on Loco Spaces, I'm 9 times out of 10, I'm in favor of anything that differentiates USL Championship from MLS, just because I think there are things about MLS's structure that are entrenched and will not be changing in the near future, if ever. Whereas I think USL Championship really has an opportunity to, like I said, differentiate itself and possibly compete with MLS for soccer fans' attention in this country. If they, do end up providing I hate to say this word, but a better product than MLS, something more competitive, something more egalitarian, as promotion and relegation tends to be. I mean, maybe not financially, but that's a whole nother thing.
Right.
But I mean, I'm excited about it because the leagues that I follow elsewhere around the world are promotion relegation leagues, and that's really part of the fabric of the sport. In other areas, it's not. I don't think it's meant to be a closed system like it is here. And while this wouldn't be a completely open system, I think it makes a lot of sense in that we don't want to just completely open up all 4 levels of USL and then some clubs go bankrupt trying to adapt to the changes. I think it's a good start, so to speak, and it's exciting. I mean, on the calendar, that one seemed like a little more controversial, I guess, for myriad reasons. I mean, some people have brought up the fact that, USL is still very much dependent on MLS talent or academy age outs, and they'd be playing on a different calendar, and it just wouldn't make a lot of sense contract wise and fitness wise if we switch the calendar. Weather conditions are, pretty brutal in the winter in certain areas of the country. Although I guess the same could be said about summer in, El Paso and places like us. But I think the aim, what Jeff Reuter's piece touches on is the aim of that would be to be more competitive in the global transfer market, because again, Europe, Latin America, a lot of the big leagues and big competitions, they operate on that, fall to summer schedule where, that summertime is the transfer window. And for, I'm thinking about this in terms of Locomotive, and we like to recruit from abroad. So I can only see that being a good thing for us in most ways, because I think Mark would love to have more foreign talent through the door. I think the only reason we've had to really look domestically is because of COVID-19. So, and also, I mean, we touched on it too with Duke. I mean, there's something just romantic about like being out there in the cold and actually like using a scarf for what it's like meant to do, which is like keep you warm. In El Paso, we have like mesh scarves that we just kind of hold up and stuff because wearing one would be brutal. So it would be interesting to have the sport in in the winter, in the fall, in those cooler months. But Joe brought up a really good point that like that would be overlapping with sports that are by far much more popular domestically. So so many thoughts on it, but overall I think it's really positive. It's a positive development. Obviously, it's still very much in the early stages, and all the clubs have to kind of agree on it. And I can already see some that probably wouldn't, because there are some clubs in this league that would immediately be relegation fodder. Sorry to say, but
Oakland
roots. Yeah.
No,
okay,
I think the thing that excites me about USL, and obviously part of this is differentiation out of necessity. Like if MLS is going to start up a minor league and start to build a structure that looks, really similar to Major League Baseball, where they own, all of the like support, or all of the minor leagues as well, like all the lower divisions. Like if that's the direction that MLS is heading, then USL doesn't really have a choice. Like they need to differentiate. But I think the way that they're going about it makes a lot of sense, because the thing that has made USL clubs stand out, and I think that ultimately is what has been so encouraging about USL, is that it is the clubs that stand out, not the league. Like no one is sitting here saying, oh my gosh, USL is doing such a great job of X, Y, and Z. They're pointing to, look at the stadium that Louisville City built. Look at, the team that Tampa Bay and Phoenix and El Paso, and like, look at what they're doing in their communities, like on the field. All of these different aspects of what makes a club and what connects it to the city that it's in. These are like, that is the strength of USL, is its clubs, like its members, which is very much akin to the way that the game operates, like globally. It's not, no one, like obviously people will talk about on Twitter, they'll talk about leagues and all these things, but like the Premier League is not the Premier League if not for these clubs that make it up. Like, and La Liga, likewise.
They're the facilitators. They're not the show. Like
exactly.
MLS is, and it's single entity, right?
Like people can talk about the Premier League versus La Liga versus Serie A versus Liga and versus the Bundesliga, but like they're just holding the games. Like they're not like the league offices ultimately aren't making the difference between a club being successful and not. Like that is up to the club, and it's up to how they run things, how they're set up, how they connect with their community, how their community supports them. And that to me is like, if we're leaning into that, then ultimately we're emphasizing the things that make this game the things we idealize about this game. Like it's emphasizing those things. So ultimately it's a step in the right direction. And I think for USL, like a lot of the cities that have done well or have USL level clubs that have done well have at one point or another been told by the other major sports that they are undeserving of a major league team. They're undeserving of a like top level team because it's not a big enough media market, or it's not a big enough, like it's not enticing enough from an ownership standpoint, or the facility is not right, and all these things. Like El Paso is a perfect example of a city that has been told over and over again that it is not major league. It is subordinate to Dallas and Phoenix and like whoever else, where no, you can't watch a football team here because it's El Paso. Like it's out in the middle of nowhere. But that shouldn't be the case. Like, no community and no club is minor league by default. Like, that is a decision that's made by individuals.
That's a construct.
Exactly. Like that, the NFL is not the gauge of whether a city deserves a spot at the table. Like, that is a decision of 32 individuals who are trying to protect their own interests. So if the system and the ecosystem that we're building like allows a city like El Paso to thrive, or like a club from a city like El Paso to thrive, then we're building the right sort of ecosystem for our clubs, because it shouldn't be dependent on whether your city has a certain amount of people or has an ownership with certain amounts of billions of dollars. It should be dependent on, like, can we run a club sustainably at this level, and sustain a level of success on the field that keeps us here? And if so, then you're at that level and you can keep it. So I just, for a city, like, following a club like Locomotive and being, you know, connected to a city like El Paso, to me, you're looking at like the ideal sort of situation where it's like, we're going to emphasize all of the things that El Paso can be really good at, which is supporting like a solid product on the field, and connecting with the community. Whereas up until this point, like, to be major league, it was about everything around that. And so now I think hopefully, and it's a little bit idealist, but I think hopefully USL's model can shine through and give those opportunities to like cities that have otherwise been kind of overlooked from a professional sports standpoint.
Right. I just like, it's just so exciting to think about how these conversations on the podcast change if we have promotion and relegation, right? I mean, thinking of like, you know, who we might face, like who's coming up, the promotion race from League One, and just like, that's just so cool. Like, I love that. That's what makes other
watch
leagues we watch.
Yeah. I would watch way more League One if it mattered.
For sure, because
like,
I want to scout like who's coming up. Because obviously we're never getting relegated.
No,
but yeah, no, it's an exciting step in the right direction, and I love the fact that USL obviously feels that they don't need to be like subordinate to MLS anymore, and it's like, okay, you're gonna do your development league, we're just gonna like completely take this in another direction, and it seems like they're listening to what fans want, and you know, it's a start for sure. I mean, I know there are lower league fans who may think there's still issues with it, but it's a start.
The other like tangential announcement that was in here was the potential of USL being included in the next edition of Pro Evolution Soccer, the long-running Konami soccer franchise,
which is like point like 6 in the article, which is madness. Like, that just shows you how much bigger the other announcements are. Yeah, I think they call it esports PES now or something. I don't know. In my day, it was like PES whatever year.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, that's awesome. I mean, it's a very different product from FIFA. But it is fun, and it would be fun to just do like a career mode with Locomotive.
For sure.
Sign Messi on a free at 40 years old, and yeah, I heard that PES is becoming like free to play now, though, which I don't know what that means for like quality.
PES last season didn't get enough credit for doing the thing that I think a lot of FIFA fans who have spent $60 on every edition, you know, each year have been crying out for, which was they didn't release a new edition of the game. They released a roster, like a full update to the 2020 version to bring it to 2021. And didn't charge full price, like to get the update, which is exactly how it should work. Because when you don't make like nominal changes to the mechanics, and you just make updates, like cosmetic updates, basically, with a few minor tweaks, like that could be just a a patch like that brings you for, 100%. And maybe you pay like $10-15 instead of paying $60 for a full edition of the game.
Right. Should be able to get like a season pass.
Exactly. PES didn't get enough credit for actually doing that when fans have been calling for that from FIFA for years and years and years.
For sure. Yeah. That would be really cool.
But I would love to see Locomotive in a video game with an accurate roster and not like a fan-made thing. Like it would be something that's actually, kept up to date.
Well, and PES is so moddable too that we could really get crazy with it.
Yeah, that's true. We could make promotion and relegation in the U.S. in PES next year, probably.
It worked in PES. See, we could do it.
So, yeah, I think it's exciting times for the USL and an interesting time in U.S. soccer where MLS is obviously looking to kind of subordinate everybody, but we have a pretty significant entity in USL that's close to 40 clubs and is going to push back against that. So I just hope they lean on the strength of their member clubs to just utilize that brain trust and rely on a structure that isn't so heavily centrally controlled as MLS and kind of take advantage of having a less centralized sort of structure.
Absolutely.
We got taking it back to Locomotive in the present, though. We got a question from Ghost086. Locomotive still have only lost one game. So he said, with only one loss, what do you feel that our team is lacking or could improve on?
We are I'm just going to keep banging this drum. We're lacking depth for Richie Wright.
Yes.
And center back depth now. I mean, the signing of Matt Lewis is a welcome one, but I think given it's hard because I think we defend so well as a team that on paper it won't seem like there's defensive issues, but there are certain players in our backline that look a little jaded. And there's been a little bit more mistakes than usual. Even Logan made a little bit of a mistake in his coming back into the team when he touched the ball with his left foot as it was coming to him and gave away a corner kick. Like there's just little things like that I feel like maybe we could improve by either rotating some of that personnel back there if possible. I know the thinness is kind of getting to us, or adding more. Mm-hmm. I think we could definitely do with another defensive midfielder or maybe another center back. Because we've got attackers in abundance, actually. So that's one, and two is just goal scoring, the usual, right? Yep. I think the use of Gomez by Mark Lowry has been spot on. Actually, I think he's really found a way to make him productive, while not making him suffer necessarily through 90 plus minutes every week. He's been very effective coming off the bench, but the way that he was used at New Mexico, I wasn't a big fan of. I think he needed more time. So yeah, just little tweaks here and there, but I mean, not a huge amount to complain about. Ever since the lost RGV, we've been unbeaten again. So maybe we're starting an even better streak now.
Yeah. I think the only thing that we're lacking right now is, we don't have any real pace in attack. And I don't mean that to slag off any of our players that currently play up there. But we don't have that. We had sort of this, I don't want to say revolving door. That makes it sound kind of crazy, but we had a series of kind of pacey players in, obviously Omar had pace in his long strides. And even, I guess Edson Partida had his, he was, pacey. But we've kind of gone the opposite way, and we've gone to players that are more reliant on their technical ability, which totally understand. And I don't think it's a negative necessarily. But I think I think in these games where they can get kind of stretched, we have like a little bit of a predictability about the way that we attack, and we are reliant on finding those balls like around the corner or finding those gaps. And we don't really have that player that's going to like necessarily create that for themselves. So yeah, I don't know. I think like there's an opportunity to add, and that sounds so strange because at the moment, fitness wise, like it seems like all we have is attackers, right. Which is such a weird spot for Locomotive to be in because it normally feels like we have a glut of midfielders. But anyways, I just think there's an opportunity there to maybe, and I'm not saying for this season, because I think we're probably pretty set. But for next season, I would just like to see us go out and maybe try to find like a quick number 9, or a quick attacker who could just play that role of either like beating people one-on-one, but I think more so just like trying to stretch teams a little bit more, and just get them out of position.
Yeah, I mean, who would you say is the fastest player at the club? I'm thinking maybe like Ed Borelli. He's really quick over short distances, like very good acceleration. Yeah.
I think, gosh, it would be really interesting to get the players' opinion on who's the fastest. I'd say there's probably, I think Zacharias might have a case at the moment, and I think like athletically speaking, he probably strikes me as one of the standouts athletically.
Okay.
But I think, that's an interesting question given the age of our side, like overall. But yeah, probably Brian is probably up there. But we don't have a lot of like players that are like blindingly quick or anything like that. And again, not a knock on them. Like we have a lot of very gifted players, and pace isn't everything, despite what FIFA tells you.
Fair enough.
But that is one area where I think like maybe across the team, like maybe there's a little bit of opportunity there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good shout.
So the last question came, and I want to like give this the right level of gravity that this question deserves, which was from Charles Fenwick. And Charles has been with Seriously Loco like from day one as one of like the best at asking like either analytical questions or providing like deep answers. Because Charles, for those who have been around with the podcast, this name is going to sound familiar to you. Charles is a Jacksonville Armada fan who followed Mark Lowry like to Locomotive in terms of like paying attention and following his career. And he's provided us with a ton of context from the Armada days. And in recent times he's been a little bit like off the grid, but he's back now seemingly. And so Charles popped up with a question. And this one was pretty deep. He said, this is a homework question for y'all. On the broadcast of the New Mexico United game, they mentioned Mark and the coach of, as he calls it, as Charles says, that team from up the road, are both in their third season with their clubs. Perhaps I'm thrown off by Jacksonville's early tumult, but that seems like a long time. Where do they rank among USL peers in tenure? And this is a really deep question, and there was some research involved.
This is like Geeks Who Drink level trivia.
So I don't have a good answer in terms of like, here's the tenure of every single like USL manager, like over time, or the average tenure or anything like that. But I can say that this offseason, USL as a league had 16 managerial changes.
Dang.
And
hot seat is hot down here.
And of the changes that were made, let's see. 11 of them happened prior to the start of the season. And in all but 1, 2, 3, 4 cases, so 4 of the changes that happened prior to the season starting involved managers that had been the manager for less than 1 year. So 7 out of 11 of the changes that happened in preseason involved managers that had been the manager for less than a year. And then there have been 5 changes since the start of the season this year. And actually 3 of these were longer tenured managers. But you have to take days in charge with a little bit of a grain of salt because of the amount of a break that we had from COVID. So Martin Rennie and John Hackworth were the 2 very tenured managers who were replaced after the start of the season. So Martin Rennie with Indy 11 was just recently sacked after the first 9 match days of the season and replaced by Max Rogers. He had been in charge of Indy 11 for 1,250 days. So,
wow. Yeah,
so just shy of 4 years, I guess, 4 full years for Martin Rennie. John Hackworth, Louisville City's manager, and a very successful one at that, was sacked after the opening, or not sacked, but I guess they made that managerial change after the first day of the season on his 999th day in charge of Louisville City. So again, just about 3 seasons worth of time there. But overall, 3 years for Mark Lowry, I would say he's now kind of in line with where if he goes to 4 or 5, he's in rarefied air. I think 3 years it's not a common thing for a USL manager to last 3 seasons, but I would say that looking across the data, it seems like 3 years is more common than you'd expect. The longest tenured managers, though, seem to be with the MLS 2 sides. And so the independent teams are they're a lot quicker to, make a change. And I think for obvious reason, like the MLS 2 sides, right, those are essentially reserve team managers who aren't really getting judged on results. Whereas independent teams are certainly. So it doesn't seem like it's a long time, but I think if we see Mark enter into the 4 or 5 seasons in charge, then he's definitely entering rarefied air. Yeah,
for sure. And I mean, if he becomes Arsene Wenger, I'm not going to complain. But yeah, no, him, Troy Lesane, I think Marcelo Serrano has been at Austin Bold same amount of time. Alan Marcina. Well, Alan Marcina was a assistant, I think, first, and then became head coach. So, point taken. It's a very there's a lot of turnover among the independent clubs as opposed to the MLS 2 side. So I suppose their coaches are you just have a job to do. We're not really super interested in winning. Whereas the Locomotives of the world definitely are, and you will get the sack if you're not. I mean, we had a question when we were supposed to record. Someone asked, is Troy Lesane a dead man walking? And it's with the way things were going, it's not totally unreasonable. Now, given what's going on with New Mexico United and the stadium and stuff, I'd be surprised if they do that to him, because I think he's overall done a good job. But yeah, those are normal questions, I guess, in that context. So that is a deep, deep question.
I think for Charles, I would say it is a fairly long tenure for lower division American soccer overall, for sure. If you're taking NASL and NISA into account, I'm sure there's more frequent changes in a setup that's a little more unstable. But I think when you take Mark's situation into account, where he was hired into El Paso as, no one in El Paso knew about, with the handful of exceptions who followed NASL to any extent, like no one knew about him or his profile. So the fact that he's now sitting in a place where I think he essentially is in charge of whether he leaves the club or not, like as it stands, he would never be fired.
Right.
And so to establish that level of stability at a club where essentially it's up to him, like that is extremely rare in this level of American soccer, because there's an inherent level of instability in the system. So the idea that he is in charge of his own destiny seems pretty unique in American soccer.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, he's deserved the autonomy that he has at Locomotive. He's, also being the technical director, and basically having relative carte blanche to do what he wants and mold the team in his image. So I'm really proud of what Mark's built here, and long may it continue. Absolutely.
Well, I think that about brings us to the end, as I get distracted by Transfermarkt telling me that Locomotive have 28 players on the roster, and now I'm seeing these youth products that you mentioned, Mikka.
I told you.
Because I was like, since when do we have 28 rostered players? It looks like we have one of the biggest rosters in USL, as we're having an episode talking about how thin we are. So,
yeah,
a bit of a strange situation. But as we draw to a close, I think obviously it'll be a quick turnaround probably for the next one, because we do play San Antonio FC on Wednesday night, which is quickly followed then by another match the following Saturday, so I think that sees us return to Southwest University Park, against Real Monarchs. And then we turn around the following Wednesday and play San Antonio FC again, this time at Southwest University Park, before playing Austin Bold the following Saturday. So, yeah, here through August 7th, it's
fast.
Every 3 days. And you can expect us to try our best to keep up with that pace and make sure we're still bringing you content now that we're set up and able to record again. We're happy to be able to bring that to you, and hopefully you've enjoyed this episode. As I said at the top of the episode, you can find us on any of the big podcast platforms: Spotify, Google Play, Apple Podcasts. So check us out on whichever platform you prefer, and you can find us on socials at Seriously Loco. And until next time, stay loco.